We are live. Welcome to another episode of the BCTL podcast. This is your host, Emil Fisher. It's been a while. It's been about a month and a half since I last hosted an episode of this podcast. I've been really busy getting back to training. The guest today is Nick Chewy Albin. He is a black belt. You live in Kentucky or West Virginia?
Kentucky. I'm from Kentucky.
Okay. Lives in Kentucky. Really high level black belt. Won the 80 or took second at the ADCC trials.
Third at the trials, and then I won Nogi Pans.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. I knew it was second or third at the trials. You had an impressive showing, regardless. And you've done a lot of really cool stuff over the last few years, especially building a social media brand in jiu-jitsu. And I feel like that's a topic that I really want to pick your brain on for the guests.
Okay. Sure.
When did you decide to start building the Chew Jitsu brand, and how did you go about doing that?
Well, I don't know that I went about it in some sort of all-knowing sort of like thinking about it down the road way. It wasn't that at all. Basically, what happened was I have a big mouth, and I talk a lot. I go on. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Like just, I like to talk. And so like, it was kind of a joke in the gym that, you would ask a question to me and then all of a sudden I would go on some long tangent about God knows what. And, what happened was I started talking about stuff, and it did this thing where all of a sudden people like at the end of classes would be kind of huddled around and be telling some silly story or something like that. And then I remember one of my students in passing, he was like, man, he's like, you should do videos. I'm like, and he's like, you should do videos about stuff like you just talk all the time. Just do it in a video form. And so he said something, and I was like, okay. And it kind of stuck there. But then, again, kind of just talking in front of a camera seemed kind of strange, at least at first. And then so I started doing some videos for my students. I was recapping some of the moves. I would show some of the drills. Like one of the main videos that really kind of got me going in the beginning was my students would come in for open mats. And they would sort of say that they were going to do some drilling, and their drilling turned into them screwing around for about maybe, 20 minutes of talking, and then they would just roll. And so I put together some drills so listen, guys, you can just do these drills and just run with it. And this can give you something to use, in the meantime. And so I started doing these videos for them. And then afterwards, all of a sudden, people started to kind of come along on the ride, so to speak, and they were, asking questions and stuff like that. And that's essentially where the questions came from, because all of a sudden, these people that were watching the drilling videos and the technique videos were then saying, hey, Chewy, I have a question about this. And then it just sort of spawned, and I've just kind of ran with it since then. But again, it wasn't something that I sort of got into thinking ahead of time, like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing, and it's all going to work out. I'm going to create this brand that people know about, all over the world, which is still mind-boggling to me. And then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool that you've gone from, and I remember kind of like seeing some of your videos a few years ago, and then more recently, you've really garnered an enormous fan base. A lot of videos about philosophies on the mat. And I mean, tell me a little bit about how you kind of come across your philosophies. How'd you build your kind of ethos and pathos throughout your career as a grappler and as a gym owner?
So let me sort of re-ask this question to make sure I'm right with you. So when you're saying about the philosophy, how I came to that, are you asking like, so, but then you were talking about the gym owner, like because like I have my own like personal stuff, and then there's the whole philosophy that goes into the stuff. So, if you're talking about just where I got both, okay,
intertwined.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as what was that? I'm sorry.
They're intertwined to some degree.
Absolutely, 100%. As far as I'm trying to repost that watch party thing for you. So
it's not working in the new Facebook option. So I'd just say just share the link.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right. So yeah, so with philosophy, man, it's just something I've always been interested in. I think that we put so much intention towards and so much focus on all the nuanced stuff that we have, like for instance, in our cars. I'm not really a big car person, but I know a lot of people that are, and they'll put so much intention to their cars, the way that their cars, the exterior and all this stuff. Someone will put they'll go through their home and they'll make sure every little thing is just right in the home and the way it's decorated and all this stuff. And for me, philosophy is just like, well, the way that you think, like trying to think about everything on a deeper level and be very precise, or at least have some deeper thought and deeper meaning to these things. And so I've had, just so many different influences in that respect. But I think that's where it comes from. It comes from a desire to want to have a sort of conscious approach to the way that I live, the way that I think, rather than just kind of letting it happen, right? Just like you take an approach to the way that you do your jiu-jitsu, right? Okay, I'm gonna really focus on this technique, and I'm gonna get this position. You really get really down deep to it. I want to have the same thing off the mat as well. Like when I'm going about something, I want to know why I think the way that I think. I want to have a deeper thought about these things, and that's where it comes from. And there's a number of different influences that contribute to that. But I think that's where sort of the motivation comes from it. But if you have a specific thing to philosophy or specific sort of idea, maybe I can sort of give you more of a specific answer for you.
I'm looking more at, I feel like there are three key personas to the black belt. There's the black belt competitor, then you got your black belt instructor, and then in some cases you have kind of like the black belt philosopher. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in like a funny way. I know I'm sure it sounds funny to some people, but
no.
The idea, I feel like a lot of the content that you put out into the world, and I think of a couple of people that do it. I think the Blast does it quite a bit. I think that Mike Mijas, aka Mr. Jiu-Jitsu,
yeah, I know Mr. Jiu-Jitsu,
where you're what you're putting out, the value that you're putting out in the world is not as technical. Mm-hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure you have technique videos that are really good, but you're not known for your technique videos. You're known for your philosophies. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? How did you build that up?
So the way that I believe that started was when I started doing the videos, people started asking questions, and the questions weren't always, hey, like, how do I do an armbar? Like, hey, Chewy, what's a really good technique? Sometimes it would be like, I remember one that was really early. It was, Chewy, I have this coach, and they described this problem, and they were like, should I stay here or should I leave my gym? And so when I stepped back, I started thinking about it, and I thought about my own experiences. I'm like, well, let me share it from that standpoint. So I started sharing those experiences like that. And what's happened is a lot of people have, sort of done that. They've asked questions that really don't pertain, because I think a lot of people, and this is something that I think, I've even talked to several black belts that have gyms, and they've even told me that I answer a lot of questions that sometimes people want to ask, but they can't ask because they feel awkward about it, right? They feel strange about it, or sometimes they just want a different perspective. And maybe that's kind of how I see it typically. Is not that I don't think that I'm some all-knowing person by any means. I always try to preface most of my videos with, hey, listen, this is just an idea. This is my idea. You take it, you run with it, see if it works for you. If it's not, then whatever, you don't need it. And then I also think that the mindset that you have to everything, like the mindset you have, like, let's talk about training. So the mindset you have towards training is going to directly impact how well you do in this stuff, how long you stick with it. Like if you've got a piss poor mindset, you're dead on arrival, right? Like before you even start, it's done. You're not going to make it. It's not going to work. But if you get your mindset into a good position, I think you can make a better run through this, even at a higher level. I think that I've met plenty of black belts that I thought maybe had a sort of a poor mindset for being a coach, right? And so it's like, I think they could be a better coach if they had a better mindset for that position. I think that sometimes even with me, when I look back at my own experiences as a competitor and all this stuff, I think that my mindset held me back. And so I think that sometimes that mental stuff a lot of times goes overlooked because we're always chasing like the technique stuff, which is very, very important. But as we know, and you're a good competitor too, so you understand that like getting in a good mental space is huge if you're going to be successful in that, whether you're on or off the mat, whatever. And so I guess what happened was just a lot of things just started coming my way that really had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. I'm a bit long-winded as I'm answering this question in this roundabout way.
Good answer.
Yeah, no. And like I said, I'm just a long-winded person. I enjoy long-winded answers. Like, my girlfriend, she would tell you, like, I walk around the house with audiobooks on and lectures on and stuff like this. I love listening to people talk out ideas in a not so direct fashion. Because I mean, you could probably equate most of my videos, you could probably dumb them down to keep training. Right. But that really doesn't do anybody any good. If I say, hey guys, we got a question from Bob here, and Bob says that he's having X problem. Bob, keep training. Music ends, right? Like, that's not going to help anyone. But when you begin to take someone through an experience or through an idea that then sort of like gets their mindset to change, and then you basically just leave like a little nibble of advice for them at the end, I believe that they're more ready for it. And I think it makes a bigger impact. At least it has in my own life when I've listened to people or gotten advice from mentors and such. And I think that that's kind of where, it's one of those things where I think it's like jujitsu. Sometimes you don't get to necessarily pick the techniques you're going to be the best with. Sometimes they just find you, right? Sometimes you just do a move. You're like, man, that felt good. That really felt good. I think I'm going to keep doing this move, right? Like I never decided that I was going to be good at half guard. I got exposed to it and it was like, that's great. That just feels right. And then I think it's this way sometimes with the way that we present our information online, right? You don't know where you're going to necessarily be good at. You try a few things. And it just so happened that instead of like explaining techniques, like which I have technique videos that do fine, the videos that seem to be more impactful, the ones that seem to be kind of my spot, seem to be these sort of philosophical rants about, ideas on jiu-jitsu and, and lifestyle and stuff like that. And so I just kind of ran with it and people seem to enjoy it. And so I have a fun time doing it. And so it works.
What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that jiu-jitsu practitioners make throughout their journey?
Some of the biggest. I can't say that it's not always the same, right?
There's some overarching themes. I'm just kind of curious if you kind of see some of the same stuff that I see.
Yeah, it's always so hard because everybody's so different. The ones that I struggled with the most, which is where it would be easy, and I think a lot of people struggle from these. One is like, for instance, in competing, there's a lot of times a huge worry about losing, which, winning and losing, right? Where people get so hung up on that idea. And one of the most liberating things that I ever did, and this is even in the gym, right? Because in the gym, it's a competitive atmosphere. If you're in a gym that's training hard, you're in a competitive atmosphere. And we know deep down that we're all making ourselves better so that in turn we can make everyone else around us better. But I think that sometimes people like me, when I got into jiu-jitsu, I had kind of, I would say, poor confidence related to myself. And what I would say is that a lot of times people get so hung up on that idea of winning and losing as good and bad, success and failure. And it's problematic because you could be getting better and you don't realize it, but because you had a couple losses, you think you're getting worse, and it may not be the case. I know that for me, probably one of the most liberating things, and probably something that impacted my game the most, like as far as in the best way possible, was like not giving a shit, right? So like I just don't care. Like if I go out to, like, I remember competing with that mindset, right? Where you compete and you're like, I don't care if I lose, I don't care if I win, I'm going after someone and that's all I'm going to do. We're just going to see what happens, right? Because then you're not so worried about the end result. You're worried about being in the present moment, about going after things. And it was this neat thing where all of a sudden, when I had that mindset, when I was competing, all of a sudden my submission rate went up, my win rate went up, because I'm not worried about losing. I'm not hamstrung by worry or fear or anything like that. In the gym, it's the same thing. A lot of times people sort of get so hung up if they're losing that they're having a bad day, right? If they get submitted, they're having a bad day or whatever it might be. And again, once you become sort of just whatever, like I'm training, I'm going to be doing this, you become far more in the moment and you're not so worried about the outcome to it. And if the outcome comes and it's not a favorable one, you just deal with it. It's whatever. But that also allows you then to be way more able to try new stuff in the gym, to just go after things. And when you win, you feel good, but you're not attached to it. And when you lose, again, it doesn't feel great to lose, but hey, you're not attached to it. You'll just learn from it. And I think one of my biggest problems was that. And that's one of the things that I get a lot of questions about, is where people get so down in the dumps when they're going through that, as you know, the dips, right? Because you have these upswings and these downswings. And a lot of people get really down on themselves when they're in the downswing, especially early on, because there's that initial like onboarding phase where, man, you're just sucking and there's no way to get around it. You just got to basically, you just have to pay your dues and you have to go through it. But a lot of people have trouble in those downswings where if they're in the dip, they feel like they're getting worse. They feel like they're getting bad, or whatever it might be. And that was one that I struggled with a lot. And it came from poor self-confidence. And again, once I could sort of check out my own self a little bit, that was a big one that was helpful to me. And that's one that people struggle with a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting, that's a really interesting part of the mental aspect of the games. Because for me, a big part of my, I guess, fear of loss came from the fear of spending the money and the time to get to the competition and then having it be a waste, quote unquote.
You're quite right.
What's that?
No, yeah. So quote unquote waste. Yeah. I was following up with you. Yeah.
Right. And it was, I guess I took a divergent path from what you just described, in that my approach has been, I don't know if I can win. Let's find out. I don't really care. It's like, I'm going to try to win. Being afraid, I've had matches where I was sure that I wasn't going to win, and then I wound up winning. And I've had matches that I was sure I was going to win, and then I wound up losing. So, I mean, that's an interesting.
But see, it's right there. That moment where you said that's exactly the way that I try to enter most matches. Is you said that I didn't know that I thought I was going to lose, or I wasn't sure that I was going to win, and I won. Right. And it's those matches where you expect nothing from yourself. You're just there. Right. And then there's those moments where you go in and you're like, I'm going to get this. I had the perfect training camp. I don't have any injuries. I rolled with this guy 2 years ago, whatever it is. And then you go in there and you underperform. And for me, it's been getting to that point of like kind of getting into that mindset, because one of the things that happened is I remember I would have these moments where I would go into a competition match, for instance, or even these days in the gym where I would literally get in and I would be maybe feeling a little off, and I would be rolling with like my toughest training partner, and I would just tell him, hey, listen, don't kill me too bad today because I'm going to get crushed. Or I would go to competitions and I would just expect to be beaten. This happened as early as a white belt and all the way up until a black belt. And it was funny because these moments where I did not care, the moments where I was not hung up on whether or not I was going to get that medal and stand on the podium or not, those were the days where I competed really successfully. I remember I was a white belt and I beat a purple belt in a competition who was really tough. And it was not because I was so much better than, it was just I was a little bit better of a wrestler, and that was about how I won with takedowns and stuff. But I got out of some really hairy positions because I stepped on that mat and I knew in my head I was losing. I was going to get smoked. So I might as well just go after the guy and have some fun. And it was in that freedom that basically there was no guy in the back of my head saying, well, if you go for this takedown, he might get you in this move or whatever. There was like, yeah, he's going to choke me. So whatever, let's just do it anyway. And it's in those moments where you're free from it and you can be completely present in what you're doing in that moment. And I think that creates a certain level of dangerousness for you as a competitor, because then you can be way more aggressive for your techniques. You can focus on hitting your techniques instead of worrying about, the end. It's what is that? They say it in like, Japanese, it's like mushin no shin, something like that, like mind, no mind, right? Just having that space of no mind. What's that?
State of no mind.
There you go. I figured you might know about it. So
yeah, I mean, that's really cool. And it's funny because I had kind of a similar experience. I was a early blue belt and I was going up against a very experienced, very talented competitor. And I had kind of the same thing where I was sure I was going to lose. Like, there was no way I was beating this guy. I'd rolled with him. I'd never been able to see a submission opportunity or a sweep when I rolled with him. It was always just one-sided. And then I kind of had the same kind of experience. That was the first time I experienced it, where I was like, there's no way I'm winning this match. And then I subbed him. Nice. We got a question in the comments here from one of my teammates, Brian Cunningham. He says, is there a moment you can point to that allowed you to shift your mindset and eliminate the anxiety of losing?
To shift from the anxiety of losing?
Shift your – is there a moment you can point to? I guess that's the real – like, was there what was the point when you realized that you had to stop caring about the outcome?
So there's a few of them. It didn't happen instantly. It was almost like – I'll give you a couple moments, but they happen periodically throughout my competitive and training. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples, and I'll sort of say towards the end kind of what made a bigger shift was. So an example, I remember as the white belt, I beat the purple belt, and I performed well beyond what I normally thought was possible because I thought I was going to lose. I was no longer worried about winning and losing, right? What was funny was the very next match, I went against another purple belt. And this time I was thinking, oh man, I might be able to win this thing, right? I might be able to win. And then he smoked me because I wasn't going for it. I wasn't aggressive anymore. He probably would have smoked me regardless, but I wasn't even able to do anything. Another example was, I remember as a blue belt, I went against this match. It was a knockout, drag out match, 2 overtimes, lost in the second overtime. I go off, I'm exhausted, right? They come up and tell me my opponent's injured and that I have to go back in. I'm so exhausted. I'm like, I'm smoked. I'm just going to get killed. I go back in and I have probably one of the best performances I had as a blue belt. And I won 5 more matches and ended up winning the tournament because I just didn't care. I was like, this is like a second chance. I wasn't supposed to be here anyway. And then I remember I struggled with this even as a black belt. I was a young black belt who, there was not a lot of black belts in my area at the time who were doing this stuff. So I was kind of leading that way a bit. And I remember I would have these moments where early on in my black belt competitive career, I would get scored upon. So it always happened the same way. The person would pull full guard. I used to have really bad mobility in my knees and my ankles where I literally could not sit back on my heels. And so I was always leaning forward and people just tip me over and sweep me. And so when they would sweep me, they would be up typically 4 to 6, 2 to 6 points, depending on if they got to mount or not. And then I'm down 6 points. So now I'm supposed to lose. And it would be at that moment where I would just like forget about everything. There is no winning anymore. I'm losing. So let's just go after it. And I would end up routinely winning these matches where I would rattle back the points and beat these people that originally scored 6 points, which is usually, that's a hard number to come back from in a black belt match. And so it was these glimmers where every time I got focused on winning, I lost or did very, very poorly. Even when I won the match, I always felt like I could have done better, And then it was like when I did not care about losing or winning, like when I didn't care about the outcome and I was just going after people, I won. Even with one of my black belt training partners, when I was a brown belt, he used to kick my butt. And I remember stepping on the mat one day and I had this weird thing where he and I were getting ready to roll and I didn't feel very well that day. And I told him, I was like, listen, man, don't kill me too bad today. And he laughed and I was just kind of laughing and joking with him. He ended up, we stalemated the first time. And then I ended up being able to sweep him over and over again that day. Funny thing about it was that just the Thursday before that Saturday, he was killing me all over the place. And it was this thing where as I relaxed and was just focused on the technique, it was fine. I didn't have this anxiety about it. Now, fast forward, eventually, and this is kind of maybe a little esoteric, but I ended up doing a sort of a type of meditation camp, right? Where basically we had to do a bunch of crazy stuff. And I remember having this moment where there was a moment where you're doing this exercise and stuff, and then you're sweating profusely, and then you're supposed to freeze and don't move. And you cannot move. You have to stand still. And I remember having this little drop of sweat. It went down my nose and it got stuck right here above at the top, right in the crook of my nose. And it itched so bad, but I wasn't supposed to move. And I felt like my whole body wanted to go up and scratch this thing, right? And you felt like you felt like every inch of your body, every feeling in your body wanted to go scratch this. And I remember thinking like, it's not going to kill me. Like, just don't scratch it. And then it's funny because the scratch went away, the itch went away. And then so I chose to sort of take that idea towards the feelings that I have when I have competition. So when you get into competition, you have this anxiety, right? This anxiety that is all BS. It's you're getting ready for something, right? And there was this moment where I started thinking about like, it's not going to kill me. I'm going to be fine. And I chose to basically, just like that itch, I chose not to scratch it, to create that distance from it. Like I'm going to focus on my techniques and everything else. There's also the fact that a lot of times I think people misjudge their anxiety. You can think of it as excitement, right? Because you're getting ready to do something. Your body's getting ready to do something. When you listen to high-level performers in like Olympics and stuff like that, they're all excited. They're all pumped up. They're all kind of in that nervous energy state because your body doesn't really disseminate the stress that's coming in. It's basically just ramped up, right? Whether it's stress from a bad thing or stress from this thing you're getting ready for, your body just takes it all in. And so you can judge it like that, where it's not so much anxiety or nervousness or anything negative. It's your body getting ready to push itself to the max and go. And that's a cool thing. That's a beautiful thing. In fact, I talk about this sometimes where there was a time where I remember competing as a purple belt. I just finished several MMA fights and I remember competing at this competition, and I didn't have any nerves because I was like, well, I'm not going to get punched in the face, so whatever. And I had no nerves. I didn't go through the normal, like, sort of rumbling in the stomach and like having to use the bathroom 30 times or anything like that. And I got smoked. There was no intensity in my movement. And so I started also over time began to look at my anxiety as that this isn't a bad thing. This is my body getting ready to go to battle with someone else and go toe to toe with someone else. And it's just getting ready for that thing. And it's just the same excitement that, every human shares when they get ready for a competitive thing, whether it's a basketball player, an MMA fighter, a jiu-jitsu practitioner, anyone. It's the same sort of experience. And so I think that one, recognizing the anxiety and being able to sort of create distance from those negative thoughts and not really scratch that itch, so to speak, was helpful. And then I think also being able to understand that the anxiety is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And then also the last thing worth mentioning is that you just got to compete more. Because as far as anxiety goes, if you're trying to get used to the anxiety of competition, you got to compete more because you've got to become comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling, and it has to become somewhat normalized. And so there's the long-winded answer to answer that question.
It's amazing. It's amazing how many parallels there are in your philosophy and what I've tried to espouse myself. It's like
how so?
It just for me, anytime that I've been convinced that I was going to lose, with very few exceptions, I did better than I was expected to.
Yeah.
And I remember there was my very first time doing a brown belt absolute back when I was a fairly fresh purple belt. I jumped in the brown belt absolute, and they're giving me a hard time about it. And I get out there, and my first match, I'm down 17-0. And then I catch the guy. And it's like, that was, and the thing is that it's the same kind of mindset that you're describing. You've verbalized it better than I could. It's really good. It's really awesome. Now, throughout your career as a grappler, at what point did you decide that you wanted to start teaching people and that you wanted to open an academy?
So the way that happened was kind of strange. I never went into it with like, I'm going to open an academy, right? Like sometimes I see like, I see young guys that are within their first couple years, blue belts, even purple belts. Sometimes I've seen purple belts open up gyms. I've seen even blue belts try to open up gyms. And for me, like what's that?
Sometimes successfully.
But for me, I would have never felt comfortable doing that, because for me, like my philosophy very early on is like, very early on was like, look, if I'm going to give something to someone, I need to have my cup filled with something, and I wouldn't have felt comfortable with it. I started teaching jiu-jitsu sporadically as a blue belt. I would teach like some basic stuff when my coach needed help. Granted, this is back in the day when he was like a purple and brown belt, so it wasn't that big of a difference. And I would teach just some really basic stuff. I began teaching jiu-jitsu in a regular form as a purple belt. I listened to the old Fightworks podcast way back in the day. It was like one of the first jiu-jitsu podcasts, and they were talking. There was a black belt on there that was talking about the fact that when you teach jiu-jitsu, you learn it much better. You learn it on a deeper level, and so I thought that sounded like a good idea. So I talked to my coach at the time. I said, "Hey, coach, Colin, can I just teach a class once a week? Whatever class you don't want, I'll take that class. Just you pick one and I'll do it." And so I started teaching like kind of like a beginner's no-gi class on Wednesdays. And, initially just did it for free. I wanted to do it for free. He eventually paid me, but I wasn't really worried about the money. I just wanted to do it because I wanted to like learn it, because there's this interesting thing. And when you teach something to someone, you've got to break it down you have to take a complex idea and you've got to break it down into simple, digestible chunks so that they can interpret it, right? So you can't go in there and just, I guess you could, but I've seen where coaches sometimes will rattle off all this stuff and it's very confusing. You got to take those complex ideas and make them very simple so that other people can absorb them. And so that ended up making my jiu-jitsu much better, because there would be a lot of times where I would do things because I just did them. It would be like, yeah, just do this, and then someone would say, well, Chewy, why do you do that? And then I would have to go, well, I don't know. I'm going to have to get back to you. Like, let me figure that out and I'll come back to you next week. So again, I thought it was really useful. Now, what ended up happening was I was the gym that I'm at now, I was actually training at that gym since 2007, after I left my old gym. And in 2009, my coaches were kind of on their, because I had two of them, they were kind of on their way out. One moved to Brazil. One ended up moving to Mexico with his wife to do something. They're back now, but they were moving away. And so they knew it was coming. And so in 2009, I became kind of like the quasi head coach, and then my friend ended up buying the gym buying the gym. So he had bought the gym. At first I was just the coach. And then in 2010, I don't know why, but I was teaching a lot of classes, and I just thought, man, if I dove head first into this thing, I think something good would happen. And I had this, just like this, literally I was driving home one night after a great night of training and everything else. And I knew I had to get up to work on Sunday morning and do my job. And I was like, I don't want to do this. And I literally pulled over into a parking lot, figured out some numbers, called my friend who owned the gym. And I was like, can you give me this much money? If you can, I'll quit my job. And so I quit my job in June of 2010 and started doing the gym stuff full time. And, again, it was never something that I went into like, I am the guy that should be teaching everybody. It was basically my coaches were leaving. Here's the torch. If you don't do it, someone else has got to. You're kind of the highest guy up on the totem pole. So just do it, right? It's your turn. And so it just kind of fell into my lap. And I just kind of ran with it, and it's been I've been incredibly lucky in a lot of senses where it's worked out very well, and learned a lot of things along the way. But again, it started back in the day when I was just teaching mainly as a purple belt, where I wanted to learn jiu-jitsu better by teaching and sort of make things better. And then eventually, as I was doing that, I basically put myself into a position where, because I was already teaching several classes by 2009, when the ownership changed, they just handed it over to me. And then later on, me and my business partner bought the gym outright together, and now we own it at this point.
That's awesome, man. How has the growth of the online brand, the Chew Jitsu following, how has that, I guess, changed the course of your jiu-jitsu experience? Like, what effects have that had on your time? How much time do you spend on working on the online content? Tell me a little bit about that experience for you.
Gosh, I mean, there's plenty to get into. The gym has always come first. So basically the online content is always secondary, right? I have to make sure my guys are taken care of, and I don't want to be a complete, I never want to be like a coach that's not there. Like for instance, a new guy just came into the gym recently, and he was telling his friends, like, I'm training at Chewy's gym, and they were like, is Chewy actually, does he even train there? And he was like, yeah, like it's not like because they were like, I thought he was just like a figurehead or something, like, no, I'm like, I train, like I train at the gym, like this week. Today was my first official off day, right? I was training the whole week, because I enjoy being on the mats with everybody, even if I'm not going crazy hard. I just like being in the gym. It's kind of like a sanctuary. And even especially in times like right now, where I feel like half the world's crazy, it's a great place where people are coming together, and there's so many beautiful experiences happening in there on a day-to-day basis that it fills up my soul. So I want to be there. But as far as the online stuff, it's allowed me to create more opportunities. So, there's obviously there's a monetary aspect to it, which is nice. A lot of that's been used to basically bolster the gym. Like last year I want to say we spent, Joe would, my business partner would know, he's the numbers guy. I'm the ADD guy that goes around and creates things. And he's the guy that like sort of levels things out, like, and helps kind of keep things going. And I think we spent like $10,000 or $12,000 like in sponsoring competitions for our students last year, for plane tickets and everything else. And, it's cool to be able to do that kind of stuff. We've been able to buy new mats and create all that kind of stuff, and give our students more stuff and give them more opportunities. And so that was kind of a cool thing. We've been able to bring out seminars and bring out people and not charge them a dime, right? We'll say, listen, we're going to bring out this person, and it's free to you. As being a part of our student, being a part of our base, it's free to you. But there's also been the cool thing where it's really made my jiu-jitsu ability and teaching better, because again, I'm now just like the self-questioning nature of it. I already question myself when I show my moves to my students question me. So then I'm having to figure out those answers. And then now I'm taking this information and I'm presenting it to hundreds of thousands of people. And now I'm having to develop that information even more. So it's been this beautiful thing of like really trying to, like, for instance, like when I get a question, I'll go for a walk out in the back, and just take maybe a 10-minute walk and let the questions stew in my brain. And then I'll come in and I'll flip the camera on and go and try to see what kind of experience that I can sort of distill down for that person that could be useful to them. And so it's been a really cool way to, further the gym business. Also, it's been really neat because when people come into the gym, they know exactly what I'm about. There's no question. So like when people come into the gym, there's no like, so what do you guys do here? Like they have probably researched everything. They know what my philosophies are on training and the kind of person that I am. And I've been told by, most people that I generally, the person that you see on the camera, that's kind of the guy that I am. And so you get what you see on the camera. And so they kind of know what I'm about. And so it works out pretty well. So it's been a lot of really cool things. I mean, all of it's been really good for the most part, and it's allowed me to have opportunities like for other students. So, to help all that online business stuff, I couldn't do it all by myself. Right. So it's like, I have to, I started doing it by myself and I was literally working my face into the ground. And so then I started paying some of my guys to do work for me to help me out. And that's been a cool thing because now we get to help people through the content that we put out. And in turn, like this sort of exchange comes back and I'm able to give opportunities to some of my guys as well. And so it's been a really cool thing. So, if there's something specific, let me know. But, I've always kept my gym going. I've always kept the training going. I've always made sure that was first. And then, just kind of found the time for the content creation and stuff like that. But I really enjoy the content creation. I really enjoy trying to find a way to help someone out because some of the questions, some of the responses have been like amazing. Even like the in-person ones too. Like, I remember having a guy come up to me at a tournament once and he comes up to me and he like taps me on the shoulder and he says, "Hey man, I want to say thank you." And I was like, "Well, thank me for what?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" This is like back in 2017 before I was like, I felt like everybody knew me. And he said, "Man, I was not going to compete. And then I watched one of the videos where you showed a match where you won and a match where you lost." And he was like, "Damn it." He signed up right then and there. And then he won second place. He won 3 matches, lost 1, right? So he had a pretty good performance. He's like, "I wouldn't have done this had I not watched that video," And then there's a lot of cool experiences like that. And so it's this neat thing where like genuinely trying to help someone out creates these cool experiences. And just like my students, my favorite thing in the world is like seeing someone either impacted positively by something I've said or done, or seeing them use a technique that I've shown them. And so being able to just sort of continue that into another place where I get to, maybe make an impact on hundreds of thousands of people too. That's such a cool thing. It's such a beautiful way to make a living. Right. And so for me, I feel like I say this to my girlfriend all the time. I feel incredibly blessed to be doing what I'm doing because I wake up every morning and my sole job is to genuinely try to push some positivity out there to someone else and try to help them out wherever they're at. So,
yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I think the number of people you've been able to reach. Are you surprised by the reach that you've been able to acquire in this process?
I'm surprised in a way because, when you look on your YouTube subscriber count and your Instagram count, those are just numbers, right? Like, it's just numbers. It's like they look cool, I guess. And I know some people get off on like, "Oh, I've got like a bunch of followers and stuff." For me though, what's really surprised me is this sort of phenomenon where I remember like it started in 2017 and it's only progressed where I go to like a competition and like, I'm like a half introvert, half extrovert. Like I teach class and I like to be like outgoing. And if I'm in the gym, like if you have a question, I'm right there with you. Let's do it. Once that's done, I come home and I like to read. I like to sit in the couch. I like to relax. I'm kind of introvert. And so being at these tournaments, I'm in these places where all of a sudden there's like these huge groups of people like coming at me and getting pictures and talking to me. And, we're just chatting for a few minutes, or maybe they tell me that I've impacted them in some way, and some of the ways have been really, really profound in ways that like, I would have never thought that the videos would have affected someone in. And it was like touching. Like one dude had me about in tears, like one time. And so that's been crazy. Like when you actually see people and you see them talking to you face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and you see that they're telling you with genuine sincerity that, "Hey, listen, something you did would help me out." That's a beautiful thing. And so that really has surprised me. The numbers of followers and stuff, I mean, it's cool, but I don't really know what it's just numbers to me. It's almost like looking at like a bank thing and you're just looking at numbers on a screen, but then it's like opposed to like actually having the money or what the money can buy. It's the same thing with like that. It's like I'm looking at the numbers on a YouTube screen. You got this many hundreds of thousands of but then when you see the people in person and you hear them talking to you, that's a really powerful experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that knowing that you have followers is one thing. It's a whole different animal when a person goes out of their way to tell you that you've impacted them.
Yes.
So I definitely, I've experienced things like that, and I would say that I agree with that. Seeing a follower versus seeing a message from a follower is very different.
Yeah. And you're a coach too, right? You have your own gym, yeah?
I'm sorry, what's that?
And you're a coach and you have your own gym, right? Or do you teach at your gym and stuff, I imagine?
I train out of Strong Style MMA in Cleveland.
Okay.
It's the gym that Stipe Miocic comes out of.
Yeah.
So I teach basically, like, there's like a little bit of a hierarchy. We have our black belts, then we have our brown belts. I want the brown belts at the gym. So when they need me to, I will teach a class or I'll help out with something.
Well, I'm sure you've had people that like you taught class and then they're like, Emil, this works so good. Like all of a sudden I'm using this move. Like you probably get that.
I had an experience where I taught an MMA fighter my method of doing the Americana. And he immediately after said, "That's really cool. I'm going to try it." And then his next MMA fight that I was at to watch, he wound up winning by Americana. And he was like, he was kind of cross training with us. So like he was working with a different coaching staff. His coach sends me a text message like, "Hey, come back. We want to get a picture with you."
Nice.
Like,
that's the best.
It felt really good. Like it's a good feeling when you teach somebody something and they're able to use it.
Yeah. You create ripples in people. Yeah.
And you never know like how far it's going to reach or like what it's going to do. Like I've been cross training a lot with a group of guys that train at GFT in Ohio here, and I was showing one of them a way that I like to enter legs, and he actually wound up winning a match at Who's Number One. Initially, he went for that and then transitioned off of that to something else, but it was kind of cool to see because I was like, that looks familiar.
Yeah.
It's always cool to see somebody use something you've taught them.
Well, right. And you don't know where that ends because if you make a positive ripple in that person, you don't know where that goes. Like, you make one, it's like, I think of life almost as if you're on a boat, just kind of going downstream, and every like little experience kind of nudges you one way or the other. So if you take someone down, just nudge them a little bit in a positive direction. It maybe doesn't make the biggest direction right off the bat, but years down the road, you don't know where that goes. It's huge.
Yeah, it could cause like a butterfly effect type of thing where it's a minor thing, but just the slight course correction could be a huge difference for another person.
100%.
Now you had mentioned the fact that you fought MMA, but then you found that jiu-jitsu is less stressful after MMA. Do you think that having that experience, having fought, and now just competing, it simplified things for you a little bit?
Simplified them, and how do you mean?
Or made them easier, rather. Not simplified, but made them easier.
I wouldn't say so, because in some ways, I mean, like there is the risk of physical damage from a MMA fight. That's a reality, right? It's kind of scary that you're getting ready to get into a cage where someone can bludgeon you down. And the main reason I stopped fighting was because I didn't enjoy it as much. I didn't enjoy the atmosphere as much, and that kind of thing. Whereas jiu-jitsu, I love jiu-jitsu and I love the atmosphere most of the time. Sometimes it can be weird, but most of the time it's amazing. I think that maybe the competition stuff, I mean, any competition experience you could have is helpful. I think that those fights, because the nerves were so extreme because of the threat of physical damage, I think it was a useful experience to have. But I think that like probably one of my most nervous moments I can think of was at a competition where I went. It was like an invite tournament. Or excuse me, like sort of an open tournament, but there was 4 black belts. We were going to do a round robin. It was for I think $500, and it was in my town, right at home. And we had 60 students competing that day, 60 students competing, and probably double or triple that in the stands watching. So we pretty much had the whole gym and their families watching. And in amongst these 4 black belts, 2 of them had beat me the previous year, and.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so I mean, man, like talk about nerves. I was like, I've got to go against guys that have W's against me, and I've got to beat them, and I've got to do it in front of all of the gym. And there is no way to get out of it, right? We're doing a round robin. Now, I remember being so nervous about it. It worked out great, and I ended up winning all the matches, won the money. But man, oh man, I remember that was probably the most nervous I've been. And just because it was just that fear of like, I don't, no matter what they say, if you're a coach, you want to lead the way if you're competing. And I don't want to let my guys down. And I know I'm not going to let them down because that's not the way it is, but I still want them to be able to say that was my coach. Look how good my coach. I want them to be able to see that. And also to show them, hey, like what I show you works. And so, yeah, that was probably one. I think that the MMA experience has probably helped, but I don't know that they didn't like extinguish the anxiety or anything like that.
Gotcha. Now, we got an interesting question from the comment section here. We got a question from Nick Andler. In regards to teaching techniques during class, do you have any advice or tips for breaking down techniques in a way that's easier for students to comprehend? Now, it's interesting. Nick and his, I think, dad or stepdad run a gym about an hour from here, and they're an affiliate of ours. So I'm hoping that the answer helps him out.
Yeah. So maybe a couple things. One of the things that I'll do is whenever I teach, I don't jump around much throughout. Like we might stay on a particular topic for 2 weeks, right? I want to drive that stuff home. So if you don't catch it today, you're going to see it again later this week. Because a lot of times, you do the move a little bit and, sometimes you just don't pick it up. And so I want to stick there for a while. So by the end of those 2 weeks or so, whatever we decide to stick on the move, you can actually hang on to it. During the actual teaching part of it, I try to keep my job. Like when I was newer as a coach, I wanted to wow everyone, right? As I got more experienced and what I think is probably a little bit wiser, my job isn't to wow you. My job is to give you the building blocks. So this way you can continue to grow. And so I really focus on that really strong fundamental stuff. And I really don't teach many techniques throughout the class. Like if we're doing an hour and a half class, I might show 2 techniques, right? And let's drill the hell out of them. Let's just go over and over again. And when I see mistakes, I'll bring them back. Right. So for instance, and another thing is, and I'm just kind of jumping all over here. When I teach, if you ever watch me go to a seminar, if you ever watch me teach a class, even if I'm just teaching, I will be sweating afterwards because I'm running around with people trying. So I'll do multiple different things when I'm teaching the technique to try to share it to them and get them to understand it. And then afterwards, I will run around and try to make the corrections on hand. So if I see someone making a mistake, I'll try to correct it person to person with them and help them feel out the technique. Because really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get those students to feel what it feels like to do it correctly, at least somewhat correctly, so they can get back there themselves. But if everybody's doing it incorrectly, we'll bring it back and we'll do it again. And I'll typically do that a couple times because especially let's say if it's a new technique, there's always this thing where you break for the technique and everybody starts practicing it. And then when they're trying it themselves, they're having trouble getting it, but they're at least experiencing the movement a little bit. And I'll bring them back together again if it's a more complex technique and show it again. And now they have a little bit more experience with it. Now we break again and come back to it. So I might do that. But, and then another thing, just sort of a side note, this maybe seems kind of small, but I notice some students, when you're talking, they almost zone out. So I'll teach the technique twice with instruction and then once where I do no instruction. So I'll say 2 times with instruction. And on that third one, I'll say, all right, guys, 1 time with no instruction, then you guys are going to go. I let them know, hey, you're going to be up next. So this way it kind of wakes them up. So, okay, pay attention. And then I'll do it. I'll just go through the movement and then hand it off to them. But I really think that, again, your job should be trying to break down techniques incredibly simple, and it should be fairly quick. I think sometimes like people spend a long time to do like technical instruction. I tend to sort of err on going a little bit shorter on the instruction time, which is it's surprising because I'm long-winded with everything that I say, but I keep the instruction time short, and then we get out there and do the movement. And I'll bring them back a couple times to make critiques and things like that and make adjustments and bring things to their attention. I don't try to give it to them all in one sitting. Like, let me give you everything about the technique and why we're doing it and why this works. And because I feel like it becomes too much. My job first with the technique is to get them moving, doing the technique, then adding some of the conceptual stuff back and forth. And, but again, trying to do it in a simple way. But I think for the most part, as you coach and teach, You start to get this intuitive sense of how to connect with people in a different form, in a different way, because everybody's a little different. Some people learn in different ways. Like some students, like I have a kid who's autistic that trains with us, and that kid, if you show it to him, he gets it a little bit, right? But if you do it with him physically, he's got it. He like once you do it once, he's got it. And then there's other people that need to like have more like auditory stuff. They need almost like, all right, guys, grab the grip and give them almost like little cues to look for, and that helps them. Whereas some people are completely visual; they can just see the move; they don't need instruction. And so, just trying to hit all these different points with people, so that this way, you know, whatever type of learner they are, you can connect with them.
One thing I've always found interesting. And I've trained around a bit, and I've been training for a while, so like I've seen different styles of teaching. And one thing I've found, most instructors that I've encountered don't like being asked what if questions. And as a student, I mean, I personally have learned probably the most from the what ifs.
Yeah.
And my coach, the current coach that I work with, has always, ever since I was a white belt, fostered that in me. Like, you know, if I asked a what if question, sometimes he wouldn't even have an answer off the bat. He would come back to me the next day, be like, "This is what happens. What if?" You know?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that cultural aspect of some of the jiu-jitsu community, and that what ifs are treated as almost like an insult? Like, no, just focus on the technique. What do you think about that?
I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. So when people have a what if question, let's answer it, right? Like, because again, I don't. Maybe some people are defensive about that. I think that's kind of silly. Like, for instance, at the end of every class, I end it with huddle together. Who's got questions? Did you run into something today that you guys saw? Or I might bring up something that I saw people do, like, hey guys, I saw a couple of you guys leaving that arm out there. Keep this in mind for later on. And do you guys have any questions? And they'll ask questions. And even when I'm doing the technique, I'll say, do you guys have any questions? And a lot of times, you know, sometimes there's a question or two, and they'll say, well, what if they do this? And again, sometimes that what if is like, well, then we'll do something else because this move wouldn't work if this happens. But now they know it was a legitimate question. You know, so I think that you're right. The what if questions are important. And depending on how people learn, I know that sometimes like just getting that dialogue going helps people a lot of times. Because I find this interesting thing where a lot of times when people are in this almost receiving mindset, right? Where I'm taking in information, their brains are kind of turned off in a way. And then as soon as someone says, well, Chewy, what if this? All of a sudden, ideas start coming, people start asking questions, and they're coming through, and you get this beautiful dialogue that people get. Like this weekend, like I was showing this armbar at the end of class that I was working on. I was like, hey guys, this is what I was doing today, because I was using it on everyone. And then one of the guys was, so what if they do this? And then I started kind of going through the options. And you're right, sometimes this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Sometimes you get students that say, well, Chewy, what if this? And there's been times where I don't have a good answer. And then I have to go back and figure out, well, let me think about that for a little bit. And hell, I've even had situations where, like, I remember one of my students asked about a particular lapel positioning, like which is the lapel that you grab in this particular position? Is it important? And at first I said, I don't really think so. But then one of my brown belts was like, well, Chewy, do you mind if I'm like, yeah, show me what you got. And he plays lapels all the time. So he comes up and says, well, I grab the far lapel in this situation like this because it does a better job of controlling posture. And I looked at it and was like, let me try this out. And then I had him do it to me. And then sure enough, it changed my mind on it. And so I believe that the what if questions are incredibly important. I think fostering that ability for people to ask questions, to exchange ideas, and to go back and forth, and to utilize all the people in there thinking together about the stuff, rather than just, I'm supposed to be the guy that has all the questions. Like a lot of times I'll look over to my other black belts or my brown belts. What do you think about this? What do you think about it? Let's contribute together because we're all in this together. Let's sort of make this thing where everybody's minds are in this thinking about the whole thing. And so I think it's a good thing. But I think if you're at a gym where you can't ask questions, I think that's a bad thing, because it's a teaching environment. It's a learning environment. Questioning is part of learning. So,
yeah, it's always interesting to me when I was a white belt, I didn't necessarily know better. And then eventually I kind of landed at the gym where I could ask those questions and actually get the answers I was looking for.
Yeah.
But it's tough, man. It's tough. I think one thing I think that happens in the jiu-jitsu community is that a lot of people will join a gym and they'll stay there even though they're unhappy there.
Mm-hmm. This is
Have you
true.
noticed that too?
What's that?
Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, well, there's this thing where people come into a gym, and a gym is a relationship, right? It's a relationship with people. And I think that sometimes people will, at times, stay in relationships where even if they're unhappy, it's comfortable, it's easy. I know the lay of the land, like maybe there's something better out there for me, but you know what? Maybe it's worse. I don't know. So I'm just going to stay here, and that happens sometimes. Again, sometimes, there could be disagreements and things like that, may not be it may not even be on the instructors. It might be on the coach or the students. Sometimes from the coaches, sometimes from the students. But I think that there are times where people stay in gyms where sometimes there's things going on that they don't like, but they just stay there because it's easy. They have friends there. They've already made connections, and, they don't want to be a traitor or whatever it might be, just they decide to stay there even though. And then there's other times where, I encourage people to do this. If like there's things that happen with your coach, feel free to talk to him. There's this, and maybe I'm just naive, because again, I think the way the students come to me, I feel like if you can't talk to your coach, this person that's in there teaching you how to choke people and arm lock people, if you can't ask them questions and check on things, like I feel like there should be that exchange where if you have a question, or even if it's something that's not specifically a technique, but you have a question about something else that's related to the gym and everything else, I believe you should be able to ask it. And maybe you don't hear the answer that you like, but the communication should be open. But as far as that goes, I think sometimes people do stay in gyms a little bit longer than maybe they should or that they want to.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I know that you're in a very different locale than I am. I mean, Cleveland's got kind of a different lay of the land, so I was kind of curious what it's like down there.
Yeah.
But but anyways, so as a competitor, as you've reached black belt, I'm assuming that the opportunities or the number of matches that you can get as a black belt is probably, at least at the local level, going to be lower than at lower belts. How often do you try to compete, and what are some of the challenges that you have found competing as a black belt now? Do you still consider yourself like an active competitor? Are you still trying to compete as much as you can? What's your cadence like?
Nah, man, I don't compete as much as I can. I compete when I want to. I just, the thing is I'm not an old man, 35 years old. I'm a fairly new, I'm still a newer model, but I got a lot of mileage on the body. And when I do competitions, I'll do them when I feel like it, because again, the way that I'm going to train for a competition, I'm going to start ramping up a little bit. And I try to stay in pretty good shape anyway. Like when I did the ADCC trials back in 2018, I didn't train for it. I was just in good shape, and I was just like, why not? Let's go do it. No-gi pans was the same thing. I just try to stay in good shape. Although I did push myself a little bit for no-gi pans with, went and trained with some guys. And so I just kind of compete when I want to. I'll pick out a couple. I usually compete on average, like in 2017, I took off a little bit of time in 2017 to get a handle on all the internet stuff. But in 2018, 19, I probably competed maybe like 6 times, like probably once every other month. Again, not a crazy amount, but once every other month. I'm kind of a creature of habit and routine. And when I go on competition trips and stuff like that, my rhythm gets thrown off from my routine. So I kind of like keeping my routine intact. As silly as that sounds, that's why I don't do too many seminars, because if I do seminars, I have to leave, and that means I got to get away from my students, and I got to get away from like my daily routine. And when I come back, it like takes me like a week to get back into it. And so I like kind of being where I'm at. And so I'll do a competition when I want to. Like I did. Like the trials and the ADCCs. And I've done a couple local tournaments sometimes, just where, they're like, hey, we want another black belt match or something. I'll jump in. But I'm not the most active competitor by any stretch. I just kind of do them when I have some fun and just kind of get into it. But I've been competing since I was, 18 years old, or no, excuse me, not 18 years old. I've been competing since I was like 15 years old. So I've been competing for 20 years. So, it's just something where I put a lot of time in. So I just kind of do them when I want to and have some fun with them.
Did you used to compete more than you do now? And
oh, sure.
Yes. Okay, so do you find benefits and or disadvantages to not competing as much?
Sure. I mean, there's advantages to both of them, and depending on how you look at it. One of the disadvantages, at least for me, when it comes to competitions, is if I'm competing all the time, I'm constantly thinking about my A game. I'm not as experimental because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to sharpen this handful of weapons that I plan to take into battle, right? Because again, if I think Hodger Gracie said it, he was like, I can count on like two hands and have fingers left how many techniques I've really mastered, right? And that's Hodger Gracie. He's like one of the greatest of all time. So we don't like you go to a tournament, you're really trying to use a very selective group of techniques. You're not really going like, all right, let's just see what happens. You're like, I'm going to try to hit this. I'm going to try to enter into this position. This is what I'm going for. And this is why people become synonymous with particular techniques and positions and things of that nature. And so that has a benefit in a way, because in a competition, you really have to own that position, that movement, and everything else. And it makes you better because you train with a certain level of intensity and focus that you just don't train with when you're not getting ready for something, because you don't want to go out there and get your butt kicked. The problem is that the training a lot of times becomes a little bit more boring for me because I'm using the same stuff over and over again, and I'm not having as much fun with the training because I know I'm getting ready for something. Now there's those times where I just compete and just do it, and that works fine too. But if I know I'm doing a competition, that's one of the things where it does make you better and it makes your game very good. But it does take away from some of the, sometimes like where you're just like wanting to kind of screw around with some stuff. For me, at least, it takes away from that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But I think that would probably be like one of the bigger things of it, like as far as the differences. Because I feel like when you're not competing, you can play around a lot more. And when you're competing and when you're getting ready for a competition, for me at least, I tend to focus on my A game to really tune that stuff up and get it ready for competition.
Ever try playing around in competition?
Ever try what?
Playing around in competition?
Not like you, man. You do some matches sometimes where I've seen some of yours and you're out there like doing some crazy stuff, and I'm like, and what's funny is there was that one that was going around, like I think it was like a couple years ago, where you're just like laying there and you're literally like, come get me, and the guy's like so scared to engage. And again, nothing to knock at the other guy. I was just like, come on, man, go after him, and you're just goofing off in the match. And I thought it was funny, but usually in competition mode, man, my body takes over and I'm like, I'm going. I'll tell you, the only time I've ever played around in a competition is probably like I went when I've done like open absolute type things where they just throw anyone of any skill level in, and I'm up against a blue belt and I'm like, all right, let's just move around a little bit. I'm not going to kill him. Like, I'll move around a little bit and then I'll put them away or something like that. But usually when it's like of like-minded people, I'll go after it. Now I will say this, I'll try stuff, because it is a form of play, right? I am trying stuff. Like I'll do some funky moves sometimes just because I want to see if it works, but it's not something where I'm just screwing around. It's like, if I'm going for like a rolling Kimura, I'm jumping for it because I want to try to land it, but it's not something where I'm just like, all right, let's just see what happens today, Yeah,
it's interesting because like the one time I remember I did the Arnold Classic a couple of years ago, and I actually competed against this one guy, and I saw that he was a 155-pound blue belt. I'm a 205-pound brown belt, and I'm like, okay, this be fun. And then he comes after me super hard. I'm like, you motherfucker! How dare you? How dare you do that to me? Betrayal. I wound up winning, but it was a lot more work than I wanted it to be.
Oh, dude, I would take a bigger guy over a smaller guy any day. Like the big guys are slow. Little guys move a lot, especially like the weight class that I absolutely hate dealing with is like 175 to like 190. Like that weight class where they're strong enough to hang, but they're faster than me. And typically speaking, I'm about 210 to 215, and I move very quickly for my weight. So when I go into heavier weight classes, I'm bouncing all over the place. But then when I go like up against these guys, I'm like, I have to change my game and be very pressury. And it's not like my best game. And so I'm like, golly, man, like this guy's bouncing all over the place and he's giving me all kinds of trouble and he's wearing me out. I'm getting tired, whereas I typically chip away at the bigger guys.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I mean, I've got a Zapatero match coming up at the end of September. I was initially supposed to go against Tex, and now it's going to be Keith Krikorian instead. And honestly, I would have rather gone against Tex.
Okay.
Just the movement difference, man. I'm a big fat sloppy fuck, and you got little Keith, and he's gonna run around me. Then you got Tex, and Tex just gonna, Tex gonna do what Tex gonna do, and works out one of two ways.
Oh man,
you get what I'm saying. I'm on the same page as you, man. I'd rather somebody be 30 pounds heavier than 30 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
Because those 30 pounds heavier, that's not enough to make a big enough difference in strength, and enough of a speed difference to be annoying.
Yeah. It definitely slows down the movement, so you can get that advantage.
What's your if you had to pick one competitive accomplishment that you've reached as the one that you're most proud of, what do you think it would be? If you're looking back, let's say you stopped competing today and you're looking back, what would it be?
I don't know. It's so funny. I used to be really into competing and getting medals, and as I got older, I was like, meh, whatever. There was a couple ones that were fun. For different reasons. So one was fun. The 2018 Pans were fun because I remember getting ready for them. I won in 2016, and then in 2018, I was getting ready for them, and I didn't realize that a buddy of mine who I was training with in St. Louis was in my weight class. It's super heavy. So I was like, well, I just got done training with this dude. I don't feel right competing against him in that tournament. If we go up against each other in the open weight, that's fine, but I don't want to compete with him in the same weight class. So I was like, I'll just go up, And so I went up to ultra heavy, and I won. And it was like, I felt pretty good about that. I choked out a big guy and then went against another big dude, and I got the win on I think 2 points or an advantage or something. It was a tough match for me, but I won. I weighed I was really light for the tournament. I weighed 209 in my rash guard that day. And then the ADCC trials was fun. The third place medal, it's a third place, but what was fun about it was, first off, that whoever was I remember it was the person writing for Flow was like, this Nick Albin guy came out of nowhere. I just totally think they were like, who is this guy? And I was able to get a couple tough wins in that tournament. And I also was able to get a lot of submissions. So most of the match, it was 6 matches total. I lost 1 to Tim Spriggs. And then out of those 6, 4 of them were submissions in under 3 minutes. Right. So in that, because it's that 3-minute time was that no time limit. And I was just going after people. I was headhunting, and, I was able to put a lot of good work into those tournaments, and I played the strategy pretty well, and I hit a good stride in it. So that was a fun one. I don't really get, I know it sounds weird, I don't really get too hung up on the medals anymore. I get hung up on the overall experience of how I executed the strategy, because what I get really excited about is when I go into a match and I hit a particular strategy that I was looking for. So I went up against this one guy, for instance, and he was from Marcelo's, or at least he had the Marcelo rash guard on. He was a wrestler. He was a pretty tough dude. And I went against him, and I'd seen his earlier matches and saw he was a pretty tough wrestler. And I was thinking I might be able to get him down, but it's going to waste a lot of energy doing it. So I'm going to pull guard on him. So I had been taking everybody down or out wrestling people for up to this point. And then we go up against each other. I pull guard, and he was going all over the place. I got him in position. And then right when I had a half guard sweep, I stopped. And then I waited for Chad, my black belt, to tell me it's points. So I stopped right there. As soon as he said, there's points going, boom, I got my sweep, got my 2 points, and then worked from there and ended up winning the match. But I was tickled by that because of the strategy for it. And then there was another match during that same day where I had been working this rolling back take against guys that turtle, because, guys will you'll pass them, they'll Gumby up and they'll turtle. And it's this rolling back take to a choke, in the transition, a little mini transition. And it hit perfectly. I hit it just like I had drilled it. And so those were cool, so those are the kind of experiences where I have fun. Even the 2016 Pans, one of the matches, I was able to get a 16-0 lead and get an armbar, but all the moves that I were doing to score those points were the techniques I had been showing in my drilling videos up to that point. So it was those are fun for me, where I'm actually using the stuff that I'm showing in the videos or into my students and stuff like that. And you know, the title's kind of secondary for me because again, I could win the title, but if I didn't perform in a way that I was happy about, I really wouldn't give two craps about it. But when I perform in a way where I'm proud of that performance, that means more to me, and especially when I'm able to use techniques or play a certain strategy. But probably, I mean, if you wanted to say like the better titles that I have, those are the titles, the no-gi pans that I have, and the trials and stuff.
That's not really what I meant. Like for me, there's a couple of matches that I'm more proud of than other matches simply because the fact that I was, like you said, it was able to execute a strategy, was able to do something that I really wanted to do. Whereas there have been matches that I won that I was like, meh.
Yeah.
Like if I win by decision or I win by points, in my head, I didn't beat you. Like I might have won, I might have got my hand raised, whatever. In my head, I did not beat you.
Yeah.
If I have to, like, if it goes to overtime and I submit you there, again, in my head, I didn't really beat you. But in order to beat somebody, I need to submit them in regulation. You know, that's just my mindset.
Yeah,
because I'm a fucking crazy person.
No, I like that submission mindset. Like it's something where like I have to balance it because I get very aggressive. There was like I remember there was one match where I competed, and if it had been a roll in the gym where you guys were rolling, I would have been like, I did great. I totally outworked this guy. But he had scored 2 points. And then when I was going around, I never secured position. I was transitioning too much. And even when I got to back mount, I was playing half back instead of a full like 2 hooks in, and I was working for the choke. And so I never secured position properly to get those points. And so he beat me on 2 points. And I remember like, you know, it was one of those things where, you know, he got up and he was like, yeah, he got up and screamed or whatever. And for me, I was like, I thought to myself like, well, I should have done a better job of making my points, because that was a match where I literally lost because I just didn't stay in a position for 3 seconds, you know, but I had like 6 advantages or something to submission. So I was just headhunting a little bit too much and not playing the rules properly.
It always amazes me sometimes, like when there are people that are thrilled with winning in spite of not having done anything positive. It always kind of cracks me up. It's like, so what do you compete? Like, what's your objective here? Is winning the only objective, or do you want to do jiu-jitsu? Because if you want to do jiu-jitsu and you did shit jiu-jitsu and you wound up somehow winning because, you know, the other guy just didn't secure the score, or the referee fucked the guy, or something stupid. I've seen that. I've seen that happen where like people went crazy for themselves. They threw a little party on the mat, winning a referee's decision. It's like,
yeah,
maybe.
I mean, it is what it is. It's like, you know, like you won, you definitely won the match. I would never personally get up and scream about that kind of win though. Like you said, like if I won on like a decision, which I've won, I'll get my hand raised. I'll take my.
Yeah. Nick, are you still there? Looks like Chewy's frozen up here. I don't know if you guys are seeing it frozen up as well. Nick, are you still there?
Frozen still. Are you still here?
You seem like you're back. You back?
I think I'm back. My little thing was doing this a bunch. Yeah, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, it froze up. So I lost you when you were talking about when you get your hand raised.
Yeah, you know, I get my hand raised. I've gotten decision wins where I got my hand raised, and it's something. It is what it is. But I'm not like super happy about it. And even for me, I don't know, man. I'm not. Again, I understand totally the excitement of winning and stuff like that. I'm usually pretty reserved when I win. You know, it's one of those things where I'm like, for me, I'm there to see what I can do, not what I come home with. Right. So like, I'm there to like, if I went out there and did my techniques like I was supposed to, I feel satisfied with that. I feel good with that. And I'll go back, and when I get back to my gym, I'll talk about it. And I'm like, yeah, guys, you should have seen it was great. But during that moment, I'm standing next to a guy in a position that I've been in plenty of times. And I'm just like, you know, I'm not
breaking up again, Nick. So, are you back?
I don't know, man.
That sucks, man. That's a rough connection. Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. Like, I have the same feeling. I've only really like kind of let out a little yell once, and that was when I won my Zapatero title back last year. I mean, that was a big win for me. I got a win over somebody I really look up to and really think highly of. So like that was important to me. But other than that, I don't really like to take too much celebration on the mat. I'll celebrate afterwards by myself. Looks like you're frozen on me again.
There we go.
Yeah, you're back. I don't know what's going on.
I don't know.
I
I just switched the Wi-Fi a little bit, so we'll see if that works.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just saying, like, I can relate with what you're saying because, like, I've only
your
really
Zapatero win.
Yeah, and that was it. Like, that was the one time. Other than that, I just that one meant a lot to me. But like, never fight to win, never any of the other ones. It's just like whatever, I win, cool.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't want to say I'm criticizing because again, this goes back to I think everybody should have like their own personal philosophy. Just like you said, like, why are you there? Why are you competing? You should know that. You should know why the hell you're stepping out on this mat, testing yourself. You should ask yourself these deeper questions. It's something that you should stew on. Why are you doing jiu-jitsu? What are you doing this stuff for? And I think that goes back to the philosophy thing. You should have your own personal philosophy that comes from your own heart about why you're doing things. And if the reason why you're doing things requires you to let out a scream because you're so excited, that's all good. Do that scream. It's just my personal philosophy. I just don't want to do it. But again, for everybody else, like, everybody should have their own thing from their own thoughts, their own heart and everything else, and think for themselves about the reasons why they're doing all these different things that they're doing, so.
For sure, man. Now, there's a topic that is kind of, it was much more relevant a couple months ago, but I feel like it's still very, very relevant. COVID-19. How has that affected you, your gym, your training practices? And what are your thoughts moving forward with it?
And maybe some people will get upset about this, right? Because, it's become very politicized and publicized. Like, it just is what it is, right? Like people, instead of having different viewpoints on things, it's one of these things where now if you're on the other side, it's like you're the enemy.
Yeah. Still there, Nick?
Can't do it. All right. Am I coming back in?
You're back. So you're saying about politicized?
I feel like I'm cutting out again.
Yeah, you were.
All
yeah, right. You're back again.
All right, we'll try it again. If not, we'll cut it short. But the idea is like, everybody seems to have this thing where you're either this way or you're that way, and there can be no in between. People can't think for themselves. They can't have sort of give and take on stuff. With the COVID, we shut our gym down. I shut my gym down before it was even mandated by the state because I was like, something's up here. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to shut it down for a while. And we closed down the gym a couple days right before the mandated shutdown happened. Mm-hmm. And then we shut down. I would come into the gym and lift. I had a few students that would come in the gym and lift weights and stuff during the lockdown because, it is what it is. And we started coming back, to the gym, and we reopened our gym back in June. Kentucky was not as hard hit as some of the areas. The things that we do now, we do the things like, again, making sure that the mats have always been cleaned, but we go through and we spray the hell out of the whole gym entirely after all the classes at multiple times a day, just in case. We encourage people to, like, hey, listen, you can do whatever the hell you want to do when you're off the mats, but I encourage you to be responsible and maybe don't go out into huge crowds of people all weekend long and then come back in and train with us, we have a scheduling system for the gym where basically you have to schedule your class, which before it was just come on in. And so we have a scheduling system just to provide some sort of limitation to the classes, because you don't want to have 60, 70 people in the gym. Just may not be the best idea. But with that said, I think we're in unknown territory with it, right? I don't think that there's a ready-made answer for it. And I don't think that there's this is going to what we have to do, because it seems like the answers change periodically of what's going to be the best point of action, best way to do about it, or best way to go about it. And so I have the gym open, and I just tell people to be responsible. And I think that they're adults and they can make their own decisions. So we do our best to keep things as safe as possible. But in the end, I think that, people should be able to make their own decisions rather than say, you can't do this because we said. Especially when we have something that we really don't know what the hell's going on with. So that's my personal belief. And again, that might upset some people. But again, these are just my ideas. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people feel the way you feel, which is that, kind of a wait and see pattern type of thing. Do your best and stay healthy and see what happens.
Well, I mean, what's better? You tell people to stay home and like drink alcohol and don't move and don't exercise and, let your body just go to shit. So we do that. And then we that's going to be great for you. Right. Especially when the demographics of who it seems to affect the worst. Again, it's not to say that anybody who's younger and healthier goes unscathed, because those people, obviously it affects those people as well. But we know that the people at the highest risk are the people that are, the most unhealthy. And to me, it's like, to me, it's like a weird thing where it's like, wake the hell up, right? It's like for people that are like unhealthy, like this should be a wake up call for you. Like you need to get your butt and do something active. Your body was not meant to sit on a couch and veg and watch Netflix for 10 hours a day or whatever. It was meant to do something. And I think that, to me, it's like, you should definitely be careful. We should definitely be cautious. We should definitely treat it with respect 100%, because I'm not one of those people that thinks it's just a complete hoax or anything like that. I'm not one of those people, but I also think that there should be some message around, hey, listen, guys, when we get through this stuff and it is done, you guys need to get your butt on a treadmill and go work out or something. Like, because again, like if something like this comes through, it's just a reminder that, like, yes, the coronavirus is there too, but there's all these other viruses that are here every single year that will impact you negatively as well. And there's things like diabetes and heart disease and cancers and all these things that are the sort of rate of which you can contract them or get them or them to infect your body only goes up when your body's unhealthy. So maybe it would just be a good idea for all of us to get together and say, let's work out, let's get in the best shape we can be and try our best. Again, some people have ailments to them that they cannot control. But for those of us that have the ability to control the things like our health and, our weight and those things, and just do things to help those out. And so again, that was my rant. So there we go.
Do you have any other soapboxes you want to get on this evening?
Oh man, who knows, dude? I get on soapboxes at times and I try to catch myself because I start talking.
That's why I have you on.
Yeah, right. But no, again, it goes back to me. I think that, it's weird. I feel like that a lot of times people don't like personal choice anymore. We just want someone else to make decisions for us.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not the first time it's been this way, right? It's like, it used to be trust the faith. Now it's trust the science. Then it's trust the government. Trust someone else so I don't have to make a decision and be responsible for it. Just tell someone else to tell me, and I think that, again, we have to take the information of experts and take it into account, because again, the people are paid money and they have gone to school and done a lot of things like that to learn the information, just like you would say, trust your coach on something, right? Because they've spent a lot of time doing this. But I also think that, again, there should be some leeway for the people to take some chances and make decisions for themselves, especially depending on the areas, especially around the country, where not all the areas are California or New York or New Jersey and whatnot.
For sure, man. For sure. Yeah, I mean, my soapbox for this evening is there's a bunch of pro events coming up here, and I think that everybody should cancel their Flow Grappling subscriptions and give that money to the various pro events coming up. That's my soapbox.
What's the events?
Other brand. Fuck Flow Grappling. What was that?
So, hey, real quick while you're here, what was, like, my buddy Chad, like, he was like pissed off about something, and I don't know what happened because I watched your match, but I had the audio turned off. What happened with Flow Grappling? Did they say something about you, or did they make some sort of shitty comment?
Well, so it started initially. I mean, I've disliked Flow for a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm not one to randomly shit on companies or people without any reason. And I'm a firm believer of you don't strike first. You never strike first. It's the wrong thing to do because maybe there's misunderstanding. So I had a match. I lost the decision. It is what it is. I went in with a shit strategy. What it was, the plan was, and if you watch any of my matches, you know that I pulled mount sometimes, and then when I pull mount, I then enter leg entangle.
Yes.
And I got a very high success rate with it.
Yeah.
I watched my opponent's tape. I saw that he greedily takes mount anytime it's offered. Like, he just goes right to it. He doesn't hesitate, doesn't go to side control. And then I saw that he will hold this like head and arm position and he'll work for a choke. I figured if I pull mount in the first 30 seconds, I will eventually find his feet. And I didn't. He was content to hold. He held on. He held on really well. It was really strong, really good squeeze. I lost. Flow Grappling then makes this post on their Instagram. When your opponent thinks he's a unicorn, so you squeeze his face and take his soul. It's like, okay, we can play this. We can do this. It's the thing that we can do. That's all.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that's like one thing, like over the years, like I'll like I don't, that's one thing, it sounds silly, but I don't like when people, because you understand that when you're competing out in front of people, it's a somewhat vulnerable thing because you're out there for people to judge, right? And it's easy to judge when you're not doing it. But like when people take MMA fighters who have had unfortunate situations happen, like they get knocked out and maybe they fall in a funny way, or, you know, grapplers do something and they'll, you know, you'll see people kind of make fun of it. You know, they'll make memes about it and stuff like that. I don't like that stuff because I'm like, you know, it takes a lot of friggin' balls to get out there and compete in front of people. And I don't like the mentality of just making fun of someone in like such a vulnerable moment where they put themselves out there on the line. They're stepping out on the plate and they're saying, you know what, I'm going to go after this and let all of you guys see. And then you have someone else that's not doing that. And they're sitting back going, all right, I'm gonna make this funny picture. And we're going to make fun of this guy because he's in this really uncomfortable. It's like, I guess maybe you're trying to be funny, but to me, it's not something to make funny about or to make fun about.
Here's the thing. Number one, and I know you didn't talk about this, but I think that pre-match antics by competitors is always a good thing.
Sure.
That's my honest opinion. Even if it's inappropriate or whatever, it's always, all it does, it creates narrative around the match.
Of course.
And I think that's something a lot of people in our sport don't understand.
That's the competitors though, right? That's the competitors doing it.
Exactly. And I'll tell you something else. If the description was modified ever so slightly to not inaccurately describe the outcome of the match.
Yeah.
They implied that I got submitted.
Mm-hmm.
The guy never tried to submit me. He held on and just held. And it is what he won. He won, but let's not pretend he did anything more than win. That's all. Like I'm all about accuracy. Like I don't think that pretending that something happened that didn't happen, and then to add to it the fact that it was Flow Grappling making these comments rather than, you know, individuals. Like if like my buddy or something or somebody that hates me made a post, fine. But Flow Grappling hosts 13 of my matches.
Mm-hmm.
I have put 13 pieces of content together for them, which people have paid money to receive.
Yeah.
I did not get paid by Flow Grappling.
Yeah.
Flow Grappling can go fuck themselves. I mean, it's that simple. Like, they are a company. They do their job poorly. They need to start focusing their efforts on doing their job better. They don't promote matches evenly. Like, there was a match on Friday night between Cody Steele and Dave Garmo.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with those two?
Oh, dude, that was a fun match. Yeah,
that was a fun match. I thought that Garmo got robbed
because of the submission attempts to the guillotines.
I thought that he had 2 guillotine attempts and 1 leg entanglement that didn't wind up coming to fruition.
Yeah.
But Cody Steele had 0 submission attempts. That being said, I'm not a judge. I wasn't there. Whatever.
Yeah.
That being said, the lead up of the match, Flow Grappling posted 2 videos highlighting Cody Steele.
Yeah.
They posted 0 videos highlighting David Garmo.
Sure.
I made a post kind of shitting on Flow Grappling for doing this, for not doing this. And then they made a post about Garmo later that night.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you know what? Maybe you guys need to promote both athletes in any meeting. If you're going to promote one athlete, promote both. Like another one, my opponent. They posted a video of him breaking down a submission that he hit. Yeah. Very cool. But why would you not promote the other side of that match? And my theory is that they don't want to see the match. They don't want to see the sport grow. I think that Flow Grappling would be at a significant competitive disadvantage if the sport starts to grow.
Mm. And
the reason I say that is because there are companies with much deeper pockets than Flow Grappling.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got Fox Sports 1, you got ESPN, whatever. If any of those companies really take an interest in promoting grappling, Flow Grappling might wind up going out of business.
Sure.
Anyway, that's my soapbox for the evening.
That's your soapbox today.
But yeah, man. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Any seminars you got coming up, or anything you wanted to chat about before we, end the podcast this evening?
No, man, this was fun. Nothing really in particular. If anybody, obviously, if for some reason you don't know who I am and you've been watching me this long, well, then good for you. But if you want to find me, I'm on you can put Chew Jitsu in on the internet. You'll find me somewhere talking about God knows what. But no, man, this was fun. I appreciate you having me on.
For sure, man. Thank you so much for coming on. What I'm going to be doing is over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be building up another little guest list. I took a bunch of time off because I was able to get back to training from the podcast.
Yeah.
And I for anybody still tuning in, I do intend on bringing back some episodes and really having some of the guests that impressed me from the earlier episodes back on as well. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on this evening, Chewy. And you have a great night.
Hey, you too as well, man. Good luck with everything. Good luck on your match coming up.
Thanks, man. It's going to be a tough one. Have a good night.
Later, brother.